meeting of May 4th to order. Mr. Samario.
Thank you, Mr. Williams and members of the committee. Bob Samario, Interim Finance Director, and we are continuing our discussion of the fiscal year 2011 recommended budget. And as you know, the Finance Committee is looking at various aspects of the budget in more detail, focusing primarily on fees and other related items. Today we have 3 items that we're going to be discussing. 2 of them we're combining. The first is we're looking at proposed fee changes, and we're going to start with the Parks and Recreation Department. And if we have time, we'll also hear from the Fire Department and Library Department. But following the Parks and Recreation Department discussion of proposed fee changes in the general fund, they're also going to include a discussion of their golf fees and the proposed changes in that area. And then we'll follow that with a discussion of the library and fire, and then we'll wrap up with a discussion of the PBIA, the proposed changes to the rates. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy Rapp, the Public Parks and Recreation Director.
Good afternoon, council members. As Mr. Samario mentioned, we're going to cover both golf and general fund revenues, and actually we're going to start with the golf fund. So before we start, I do want to, because the golf budget this year is very different, and I'm going to talk about why. Largely because we've had such a challenging year out at the golf course this year. But I did ask to have Chris Tallarico, who is the golf pro out at the golf shop, to join us today. The golf course is an operation that includes 2 concessionaires. We work very closely with Chris, who's really our eyes and feet on the ground in terms of the golf course operation. Mark Reed, who's our maintenance, the golf manager in charge of the maintenance. So it's really a team effort. So just a quick look at the golf revenues, which are proposed to be at just a little over $1 million. And you can see that the majority of our revenue is from golf fees at 85% and rents and concessions at 14%. And I wanted to just cover briefly the golf fund reserves. Not much different from other enterprise funds. We are mandated to have a 15% economic uncertainty, 10% against future year's budget, and capital is 5% of fixed assets. And here, a look since FY07, you can see that we've been quite varied in our reserves above and below policy, largely because we had built up our reserves since 2004 with the intent of having funding for the Golf Course Safety Improvement Plan, which then we began spending in 2006. And so what you can see is that the reserves have gone down over time to a low of last year, or this current year. But our FY11 budget does intend to bring us back towards being more balanced in our reserves. And I mentioned that 2010 had been a challenging year for us. We had 2 major construction projects out at the golf course. We were also affected by the local economy. We've seen a continuing trend in golf, largely because of so many golf courses that have been built in recent years, and the number of golfers is kind of spread across all the golf courses, and also just nationally there's been a decrease in the number of golfers per year. We had an above normal rain year. So what we've seen this year and what we're projecting through June is that we'll actually see a decline in rounds at the golf course of 16%, and we're projecting that our revenue will be down as much as 19%. That made, and let me actually, I wanted to end on a positive note because with all of that, the golf course is in excellent condition at this time. The projects are completed. We've got 2 new greens. For the first time ever, the golf course has continuous cart paths, which are kind of a key to being sure that the golf course is playable in all kinds of weather and following rain. And also we have some beautiful new water features. So everyone has been saying that the golf course has never been in better condition. This shows you the rounds on an annual basis since 2004, and you can see that we've continued to have a slight decline. We've kind of averaged about 5% per year, but you can see then FY10, we're really projecting this will be our lowest year, but we know the reasons for that, and we are projecting that that climb will go back up in FY11. So as we developed our budget strategy, and this is kind of getting into a bit of how we developed our budget, which we'll talk about more when we do our presentation of the golf budget to City Council, but I think it's important, given the proposed fee increases that we're talking about, to address this here. Our primary focus as we were developing the budget was to really look at how can we increase golf rounds, because that generates more money and helps us not have to sustain such significant fee increases, such as what we're proposing. So you can see some of the things that we're focused on to increase the number of golfers visiting the golf course. And our proposed budget, in order to make the budget work, we were in a position to have to look at some serious fee increases, and we're going to present those to you today. But we've had some great budget work sessions with the Golf Advisory Committee, and staff is working with the Golf Advisory Committee to develop alternatives to the proposed fee increases. And so we are going back to them next week with following up on some of the strategies and the alternatives. And our goal would be to actually show an increase in rounds, reflecting the work that we're doing with marketing and some other promotions, and not increasing the fees, or not increasing the fees to the level that you're going to see proposed to you today. So we did not increase any fees as we went into FY10, and we did that intentionally because we knew that we were going to have construction at the golf course, although we didn't know that the construction was going to be as extended as it was. The golf course has 22 fee categories. We're pretty much across the board looking at almost all of them to increase. We are proposing one fee to be eliminated, the resident discount, which is actually not the resident discount itself, but a fee to register as a resident to get the discount. And we're basically looking at a $2 fee differential between resident and non-resident, and I'll go over those in more detail. So I have 2 or 3 slides here that kind of highlight a few of the golf fees. So the top 2 are 2 that the Golf Advisory Committee is really in discussions with staff about, as to see to whether we can really look at something different. So currently, as I mentioned, county residents, in order to qualify for the discount rate, are required to pay a fee to register as a county resident. And that has really become a non-customer friendly transaction at the golf course, and so we are proposing to eliminate it. We are also looking at the frequent user card, which is sold to golfers, and it entitles them to a discount every time they golf. And we're looking at whether we might want to have a similar model, but something a little easier to manage. For instance, looking at, for every 10 rounds you play, you get 1 free. So we're trying to look at something that might be a little more customer friendly. But what you can see is, because most frequent users have also paid to register as a county resident, we have proposed at this time to eliminate the county resident fee and just increase the cost of the frequent user discount card. So it's roughly the same amount of money. They're not paying for one, but they would pay more for the other. And you can see there are a couple of examples where you see the fee increase going up $3 for residents. So the adult resident 18-hole weekend fee goes from $34 to $37, and the senior 18-hole weekday goes from $25 to $28. And just highlighting a couple of other fees, because basically the resident fees are all going up by $3 and the non-resident fees by $5. So looking again at the twilight rates, just an example of us looking and seeing how do we remain competitive with the other golf courses. You'll see that we are either not proposing an increase or reducing the fee in order to remain competitive with other golf courses. So as I mentioned, the Golf Course Advisory Committee and staff are working on some alternatives. We're actually feeling very confident that we are going to come back with some other proposals other than the large fee increases that are currently in the budget, and we will bring those recommendations back to the Park and Recreation Commission and Council prior to budget adoption. And Assistant Director Jill Zachary will cover the general fund.
Council members, I have a few slides to review with you. First of all, for fiscal year 2011, our proposed revenue is just over $4.6 million. This shows how that revenue breaks out by division, administration, parks, and recreation, and represents a 2% increase over the FY09 adopted. Revenues, that $4.6 million, can get broken into 5 different categories. The ones we'll be focusing on today in our further slides really have to do with rents and leases, facility rentals, and activities and classes. Contracts, which represent 38% of our revenue, pretty much cover the services that we might provide for other departments. A significant portion of it is the utility users tax, which is dedicated to street tree maintenance. And then recently, with the adoption of the FY10 budget, there's funding that comes in from the waterfront department to support the beach lifeguard program. In the Parks Division, we are proposing a new fee for fiscal year 11. It's a fee to apply to have a street tree or a regulated setback tree removed. In our review of the staff resources expended to process tree removal applications, $50 represents about a third of the cost, and that's staff going out to inspect the tree, going back out with the Street Tree Advisory Committee, posting the tree when it's considered by the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Street Tree Advisory Committee. Any revenue that is received from application fees would go right back into maintaining our street trees. We're proposing total revenue of $3,000 for fiscal year 11, so that assumes there's 60 applications that we process. In our review of fees from other communities, it's actually quite a bit less than what other communities charge, either for an application fee and or a permit fee once the application is approved. We would waive the fee for any street trees that are determined to be unsafe and require removal. So if a property owner contacts us and asks us to inspect the street tree in front of their house, and we do so and determine that it needs to be removed, we make an administrative decision, and we are able to do that under the municipal code and go ahead and remove that tree. So there would be no fee or application process. Staff, just in closing, during the 2-year review that staff undertook related to trees and landscape ordinance changes, we did discuss this and determine that we would come back to council as part of the budget process to propose this fee.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Judith McCaffrey. Actually, Bob, if you could put it back to where it was. There we go. Proposed fees. I'm going to speak a little bit about Parks and Recreation's fees and charges. Parks and Recreation has 382 program and facility fees, and in the FY11 budget, we are proposing that 75% of these fees remain unchanged, and proposing that 80 fees are increased. We're going to decrease 6 fees, and we have created 10 new fees for new programs that we'll be offering. Just as an aside, in FY10, we proposed to only raise 37 fees. So we've been very conservative over the last few years as far as proposing fee increases. Okay. When setting our fees, we look at a number of factors: the community need, the community importance of the program or service, the demographics of our target audience, and whether the activity is unique or available in the community. We also look at our competition for participation base, especially we're looking at summer camps, adult dance classes. Staff do a survey each year of our competitors to ensure that our fees are competitive and in line with other organizations in the community. Our goal is to provide quality, reasonably priced activities to the families in our community and keep our programs priced so we can maximize our participation. This shows the Recreation Division's cost recovery over the last 4 years. In FY11, the Recreation Division is budgeted to bring in approximately $2.8 million in revenue. And as you're seeing, we're projecting a 52% cost recovery this next year, meaning that 50% of all our expenses, salaries, supplies, and allocated costs are recovered through revenue. Staff has been working diligently for the last 4 years to reduce our expenses, increase our participation, and as a result, we've seen a 12% increase in our cost recovery over the last 4 years. Wanted to just review some samples of some fee changes. The first one, the Youth Recreation Swim, is an example of a fee that actually we're reducing by 50%. With the idea that we'd increase participation. We have a large capacity at Los Baños Pool and great number of lifeguards to supervise those youth swimming. So we are proposing to reduce that fee, and will greatly increase the number of youth who participate in that program each summer. And then secondly, I wanted to say a few words about the Santa Barbara Arts and Crafts Show, proposing a 5% fee increase, or $24 annually. This is an annual fee that allows show members to show 62 days in a year. This fee has not been actually proposed to be increased for the last 4 years. And what this basically equates to for those 62 show days is we're proposing an increase of 36 cents per day, basically going from $7.64 a show day to $8 a day. Okay. I also wanted to highlight we are proposing some special event fee changes for large sporting events. Those are events of 1,500 people and more, and large public special events of 1,000 people or more. And then at the bottom, we are proposing a new fee for setup and breakdown days for feature films. Lastly, I wanted to give you some specific examples of sporting events and public special events, and showing what they paid last year and what they would pay this year with proposed fee increases. Keep in mind that each one of these events is different, with the number of event days, the number of sites that are rented, and the number of setup days, and whether the group is nonprofit or for-profit. And I just want to highlight a couple examples, first being the AVP tournament, which is a for-profit group. As you see, their fee would be proposed to increase by 9%, or $878. And lastly, an example of a nonprofit group, Fiesta, their fee was proposed to increase $1,220 over last year.
And so that was a very quick overview of the Parks and Recreation, both revenue and our fees. We do know that our fees and charges document is fairly extensive. I know that council members have a copy of that in your office. We are happy to answer any questions that you might have and provide additional information if needed.
Is there any members of the public here to comment on these fees? Seeing none, we'll take some questions before moving on. Any questions from members of the committee?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco.
Thank you. If you could just go back real quick to the reserves slide, and if this is complicated, we can discuss this offline. So that first column is the required reserves based on,
The golf budget each year.
okay. So that's fluctuating, and then what exactly is the above or below column showing?
It's with each of the percentages that's required, as I mentioned, you know, the 15% for economic uncertainty, et cetera. Because those numbers vary each year, based on that budget, that is the amount that would be, that we would either have above or below policy.
If I could just add something to that, you'll notice the required reserve policies go up and down a little bit different than you see in the general fund,
Yeah.
and that's because the way we establish the reserve for capital is different in enterprise funds than it is in the general fund.
Okay.
It's fixed in the general fund at $1 million, but it varies based on essentially how much is invested in their capital assets and how much they spend each year. So it's kind of an average of how much is spent in the capital program. So it will go up and down, unlike the general fund. And so that is the combined amount for required per city policy for economic disasters, budgetary reserve, and capital. And then the above and below is just whether there's excess or
Okay.
or shortfall in that.
Okay. Well, just for example, just in the first two lines, you've got required 567, and it's 45,000 above. Then the next year, the required is 678,000, and it's 247,000 below. It just seems like there's a lot of fluctuation here. That's all. We can talk about it offline. No big deal.
Councilmember Sell?
Well, it's probably more comments. My husband golfs twice a week. And I think at the time when you probably saw the drop-off was when fees went up, and the difference between playing early morning, the back nine, and the full 18, there was very little difference in that. And he personally had some old duffers who at that time felt it was out of their price range and stopped going. This also created a lot of unhappiness, and during that time he and his four buddies for years were going to Ventura or other locations. Part of it was due to the tree removal, making the course less challenging with some of what was going on, and I understand there was a mold problem on the grass or a fungus, and that was part of the reason. It would have been nice to have explained that, because they just saw the denuding of the course and chose to go elsewhere. Also, with the $55 fee for golfing, he's a frequent player at Sandpiper, and it's $60 now, and you don't have a course marshal running up your back every minute saying move on, and I think that was part of what irritated a lot of people, was that this hope of increasing the number of people actually chased them away through the policies there, and I mean that to be helpful. Hope I'm not just grousing. But I think maybe looking at some of those fees and adjusting them accordingly. And then I was noticing, and this is a question, that the administration fees for 11 are going up quite a bit from the previous year. Did I misread
General
that?
fund. In the general fund, you're mentioning
Right.
administration revenue.
That's
Councilmember Self,
yes.
if I could answer, I think he'd like some more explanation as to
Right.
what that is.
And I think I'm reading it backwards.
That's the revenue. We do have an increase in fiscal year 11, and the revenue in the administration division is related to the staff that provide project management for our capital projects, whether it's general funded, or if they're funded by other funds, or they're grant funded. And so it offsets the operating costs for those staff. Since 2009, we have been moving projects along, and so we've been able to increase the revenue in the division
Okay.
to cover those staff.
Okay, and then, did I understand that if it's a street tree to be removed, the owner doesn't have to remove it? The city is removing a parkway tree that's unsafe?
Councilmember South and Finance Committee, when a tree is unsafe, the city, our forestry division, does remove it at no cost to the
Okay.
property owner.
Thank you. And I guess since we have seen such a dramatic decrease in festivals, we used to have a lot of festivals. I lived near Oak Park, and they were always happy sounds, and it was a nice thing. And I have heard from people over the years that the primary reason is these nonprofit and community people who are getting together to have these festivals find it's priced them out of the market. And I think as a community service, that would be important. I think in a previous discussion you had felt that it had just gone its course and the people were no longer interested. I'm not hearing that. And that when you look at increasing the festival fee, you not only have the fee for the festival, there's a fee for electricity, is it in one or two locations? It was these organizations that put in the electricity, and then plus the charge for electricity. Do they need water? Do they need this? Do they need a permit for alcohol? And then the caging and the staff to watch it. So it's not just that fee you're talking about. There is a significant cost for any group wanting to put on a festival, and I think, what are we having, 2 or 3 festivals at the park?
If you're speaking specifically of the Oak Park Festival,
Yes.
I think this year there were 3.
Right. And we used to have them regularly. So that I would like you to consider that. And again, at a time when we're not in an inflationary period and we're looking at what does a community provide, I think that should be considered. And then my last comment would be about the programs that we manage at 52% recovery. I'm regularly hearing YMCA and other groups advertising these programs. I think rather than being in competition and losing money, that maybe those private companies can take on this task for, and you know, it's even more difficult for them because if they use our parks, they have to use a fee. If we use our parks, we don't have to pay the fee. So we have an advantage, but that's not really accurate because we are losing money on all of these. So I think that should really come into play. Thank you.
Ms. Rapp, I'm not sure that your light doesn't look to be on. Oh, it is. Okay.
Chair Longstreet and council member, just a couple of points. When we do our budget presentation, I think you'll have a better understanding of the Recreation Division budget because that cost recovery actually includes all of the costs to operate the recreation facilities. So I think you'll see that that balances out a little bit more. We try to be very competitive with the other organizations in the community, and we price our activities that way. And we have also tried to be conservative. If an organization is offering an activity and they're doing a great job and doing what we do, then maybe we don't need to be in that business as our dollars have gotten so much tighter. So I appreciate your reflection of that because that's definitely something that we're trying to be more sensitive to.
Thank you.
I appreciate that the administration is looking at the proposed golf fee increases and seeing which ones are really necessary and advisable, obviously, because, if rounds are going down and have been going down, it seems like we need to be careful about our pricing policies to not feed that trend and to counteract that trend rather than feed that trend. And of course, I think it's in the fact that the course is in great condition and aesthetically more pleasing will be helpful as well. Who's next? No, I think it's presentations.
Okay. I think we'll follow with the fire department.
So you're proposing fee increases for responding to fires now?
Do you want me to do this for you? Do you want to do this for you? Toaster's ready to go? Okay. Turn it on.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Finance Committee. I'm Andy Demizia, Fire Chief, here today to provide you with a brief presentation on proposed changes to the Fire Department revenues for fiscal year 11. A brief overview, we're not proposing any changes to our established fee schedule with the exception of a proposal to provide for amendment to Title 8 of the Municipal Code, providing for cost recovery to certain kinds of incidents, certain kinds of emergencies. Why are we doing that now? Well, what we've seen is it's a crisis for all of us, but for fire departments, it's particularly important that we provide the highest level of service despite the things that are happening in terms of increasing demands for our services and the economic situations that we're in. We have a tight fire department budget, and we don't have a lot of overhead. So in order to deal with that, we're looking at trying to increase our revenues by approximately $100,000 through this process. And we can go to the next slide. What is cost recovery? What are we proposing here? It's a billing service to recover costs for response to certain kind of emergencies. Listed here, you see examples of the emergencies. This is in recognition of the fact that Santa Barbara has a primary transportation corridor of Highway 101. So what we respond to primarily, what we are proposing to recover only a portion of our costs, I might add, for our motor vehicle incidents with fluids on the ground, with no fluids on the ground, for vehicle fires, for underground pipeline incidents, for false alarms, power line incidents, hazardous conditions, specialized rescue. Now, I want to make it very clear that this is only for non-residents of our area and for at-fault folks. So what we're talking about primarily is billing insurance companies through a third-party vendor. This is not a tax, and once again I want to emphasize that. What we're trying to do is recover part of the services that we provide. We feel strongly that the city provides the infrastructure for the fire department. They provide for our stations, for our wages and benefits, for all the equipment we use, but not necessarily to cover the costs for all the different kinds of responses that we provide. A real good example of that is our hazardous materials response team. Santa Barbara foots the lion's share of the expenses to provide for a response for hazardous materials spill for the entire South County. And so we're looking at ways that we can continue to provide that service to the public because we think it's important and the public has become accustomed to that kind of response level. Once again, this is for non-resident, at-fault folks that are involved in incidents. We would be billing the insurance company. Actually, the third-party vendor would be billing the insurance company. We looked at doing an in-house type situation, which is what the police department currently does when they bill for responses to false alarms. But we we thought that the overhead required in discussions with Bob and his folks that it would actually require putting another position on, so more effectively is to look at a third-party solution. This is also not a new program. Quite a few fire departments are doing that, and they've been doing it for a long time. I know for a fact that larger fire departments, county fire departments, have their own in-house billing, and an example here is our neighbors, Santa Barbara County, Ventura County, and Carpinteria Summerlin that's actually doing this kind of a billing solution right now. This is an example, and this is kind of timely because you might have seen this yesterday in the newspaper. Carpinteria Summerlin responded to a tanker accident. This is involving a tanker with aviation fuel going to our airport. And if this were to happen today in our city, we wouldn't be able to recover any of the costs associated with that response. Carpinteria will be able to do so. How would we implement this? Of course, we would involve public outreach, and we would discuss with the stakeholders, similar to how we've implemented the sprinkler ordinance. So we're concerned that we talk to our public and let them understand why we're doing this, how we're doing it, and who it would affect directly. We draft the new ordinance, wait for council approval, of course, go through the process of selecting an appropriate vendor. We would implement new procedures, and one of the good things that we could do would be to use our current existing records management system. It wouldn't require an outside additional paperwork for us, so it'd be fairly streamlined for us to implement. And then we would, of course, collect a fee as part of our revenues for fiscal year 11. That's all I have. With the exception of this, we're not proposing any additional fee changes through our fee structure. Fire Marshal Poirier is here if you have any questions about the existing fee schedule for inspections. Administrative Services Manager Lectie is also here if you have any questions.
Any members of the public here to speak on this item? Questions from the committee members? Councilmember Self.
Thank you, Chair Williams. You probably don't have this book, but on page 44, it talks about DUI response fees. Are these all new?
I'm not familiar with that. That sounds, it could be police.
That's police.
Related.
Oh,
yeah, I haven't seen their
is
response.
no, I'm
But it
sorry.
It goes to an example that other agencies are currently doing that within the city.
Okay, because I'll check with you privately, because there was supposed to be a code. It's underlined, it's a change, or so I'm really not sure which one of these are new and which ones are just ongoing. So I'll get with you later. Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? And I'll just, for one, say that cost recovery is an important strategy that we can use to maintain the level of service and public safety that people of the city expect and hope for in a case of emergency. I think it's really important for us to be looking at doing that to maintain the staffing that we need to adequately respond to emergencies. So I really appreciate staff for being responsive really to the request that I see the council pushing back on when there was the proposal for browning out Station 3. You know, that members of the public understandably were worried about it. We're worried about it. And I think it is a superior option to be trying to reach for cost recovery, especially from, really items that we should. In one of the things that happens a lot in some jurisdictions is just, especially in parks, is just people doing really stupid things and needing a rescue that costs the taxpayers a huge amount of money. And obviously it may not be fair for taxpayers at large to always have to pay for, one person's negligence.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Smaro.
Okay. Library is next. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair Williams, committee members. My name is Irene Macias. I'm the library director. I'm here to present proposed fee changes for the library department. We aren't proposing for the next year any changes relating to our core services, which is circulation of materials or any programs. But the library does have, in most of its branches, meeting rooms that are used for meetings and also for as art galleries at the Central and Goleta libraries. And so we also do have 2 tiers of costs. We have costs for use by nonprofit organizations and costs for use by for-profit organizations. So we are proposing a few changes in our charges for meeting rooms, and you see them listed here. We are, I think the most popular use of any of our rooms is the Faulkner Gallery, which we currently charge $75 for the first 3-hour period, and we're proposing an increase to $100. We do have charges for each additional hours, although I would say that most of the groups that use the meeting room use it for the 3 hours. So you can see there we have some changes to the Goleta Library, only one minor change there. And at the East Side Library, we are proposing to increase the use of the Martin Luther King wing from $30 to $50 for a 3-hour period. So that covers and we're expecting, Bob, if you could slide that over a bit, the total increase in revenue for all these is projected to be about $6,300, so it's not a large amount. Next page. Excuse me. Okay, and then the next set of fees relate to the use of these rooms for for-profit organizations, and these costs are higher, although I will say that we don't often get rentals by for-profit organizations. Primarily when we do, they're in the small east or west Faulkner galleries. And then we do charge, if you see down there, D, charges for use of exhibit space. Currently, art associations can rent the Faulkner Gallery, art gallery, for $400 a month. We're proposing an increase to $450, and this is the fee that is paid for by the associations such as the Santa Barbara Art Association or the Watercolor Association. And then in the East and West Faulkner galleries, those are small galleries, and those are awarded through a jurying process to individual artists. So we're proposing that the fee there be increased from $100 to $125 per month. And then the Goleta Library is also, their multi-purpose room is also an art gallery, so we're proposing an increase there. So the total increase for all these fees is estimated to be about $9,000, and $7,000 of it is attributable to the general fund and $2,000 to the county library fund. That's the end of my presentation. Any questions? Okay.
Any members of the public wish to speak about the library? Seeing none, and no questions or comments from the committee members. So you're off the hook, Irene.
Thank you.
Okay, our last item relates to the downtown parking, the PBIA, proposed fee changes. This? Show.
Mr. Allen.
Okay, thank you. Chair, members of the Finance Committee, Browning Allen, Transportation Manager. With me, I have Brandon Bodette. He's the Acting Parking Resource Specialist in the Downtown Parking Program and is our expert in terms of the parking business improvement area. So what we're here to talk to the committee about is some adjustments we're proposing to make to the PBIA for the upcoming 2011 fiscal year. At the request of the Downtown Parking Committee, prior to the beginning of the 2007 fiscal year, the Parking Committee asked us to take a look at the various categories in the PBIA to make sure the assessments were correct and it was equitable for all users of our parking facilities downtown. So what we did is we worked with the Downtown Parking Committee. They established a subcommittee to work with staff. We hired Penfield and Smith, who was the engineer who did the engineer's report back in 1999, and we took a look at all the categories in the PBIA and met with the committee, and the committee was recommended to the subcommittee recommended the full parking committee some changes into the some of the categories. We've been working with the Downtown Parking Committee now for just about 3 years. It's been before the full committee 4 to 5 times, and each time the committee has recommended we move forward with the changes. They've been delayed for a variety of reasons, which I'm not really going to get into a lot of detail. But last month at the April meeting, the Parking Committee did review the annual engineer's report so we can move forward with our annual assessment as well as the proposed changes, and they are recommending that the council move forward with the changes. Not included in the engineer's report for the upcoming fiscal years is a charge to the nonprofit performing arts theaters, like the Libero or the Granada Theater. We met with a couple of council members who were the liaison to the Granada Theater about a year and a half ago, and they didn't feel comfortable moving forward with that. The Downtown Parking Committee is still recommending that we assess the performing arts theaters, but not for the upcoming fiscal year, for the following fiscal year. So it'll be a year from now for FY12. That would give the theaters the opportunity to include the adjustments in their rate structure when they start booking their shows for the next season. Next slide. Maybe we can just zoom in on that a little bit.
Different sections you want to zoom in on.
Yeah. This slide here shows the categories that were where there are no changes in the categories where we are changing. So the first 3, there's no changes, remain the same. The 4th line down is the movie theaters, Metropolitan Theater Corporation. The recommendation from the Parking Committee is going from .08 per $100 sales to .29 per $100 sales. That will put them in the same category or the same rate structure that most of the restaurants in the downtown are currently paying into the PBIA. The feeling in working with the subcommittee and the full Downtown Parking Committee, as well as our engineer, was that the fact that movie theaters, they can turn over a theater anywhere from 4 to 6 times in an evening, and big impact on the downtown parking facilities, and each person that comes in and out of the parking lots are taking advantage of the free period. The .08 was established about 10 years ago, because the movie theaters are still a major draw into our downtown. But the experienced people who are coming to the downtown is not just going to the movie; it's to go shopping or go to restaurants, a variety of reasons. So the Parking Committee feels that going to a .29 is appropriate for the movie theaters, and it's similar to what some of the committee members, in fact, are paying for their own businesses. The next category is the line below is the fitness and health clubs. creating a new category for them. Currently, they're put in a miscellaneous category. We're charging the same as the movie theaters, .29 per $100 sale. No change in what we're charging them, but just making it clear that there is a category for fitness facilities and health clubs, which include dance studios or karate studios. Again, typically you can go in and out of a fitness facility or dance studio in less than 75 minutes. So there is impact to our parking facilities. The next one, next line below is our financial institutions, the banks, primarily. Currently, the way it was set up is they are charged based on how many millions of dollars they have on deposit on January 1st of each calendar year. So it's $32.50 per $1 million on deposit. So, for example, when the economy was good, a new bank opened, say, on January 5th. They didn't pay PBIA for the following year. What this is doing now is changing it to a usable square footage, 0.48 cents per usable square footage. So a bank like Santa Barbara Bank and Trust, based on the current rate, they're paying quite a bit right now. They'll probably see close to a 50% reduction in the PBIA they're going to be paying. Some of the other banks who have a lot smaller deposits will see an increase, but overall, this category will be revenue neutral to the downtown parking program. Moving on down, the next area where we're making proposed changes is, let's see, where is it? Educational facilities. Next, second from the bottom, is currently they're in a miscellaneous category. We're charging them 0.19 per usable square footage. A few years ago, when Brooks came into town, they opened a school in the old moving storage right next to Lot 10. Struggling what category we put them in, so we put them in miscellaneous. We charge them 0.919 per square footage. Just making it real clear, for-profit educational facilities would pay the 0.19 for usable square footage. Obviously, like if Santa Barbara School District were to open a facility in the downtown that would be in the PBA area, they would not have to pay in the PBA. They were exempt. Governmental agencies are exempt from paying in the PBIA. Again, no change in how much they're paying, just making it clear as to what category they would be in. And the final category where we're making recommending changes is in the hotels and motels. Currently, they're exempt. There are 3 hotels in the downtown. We're recommending that one, creating a category for them, and they'll start charging them. It's $67.50 per guest room per quarter. Roughly $270 per quarter per guest room. They do get credit for parking that they provide. It's like, for example, the Canary Hotel. They have some parking spaces, so they'll get credit for that, and they'll pay for anything above and beyond that what they were required. There's one hotel, is it Santa Barbara Hotel? Hotel Santa Barbara, they won't pay anything in the PBA because they have parking for their customers. So we look, so in all these categories, if a particular business has their own parking lot, they'll get credit, for that. So they wouldn't pay the full amount, so we'll give them credit for providing their own parking. So that's kind of a summary. I had a slide, but Brandon noticed a mistake on it, so I don't really want to show that, but I will just go over this real quickly, verbally with the committee. Like Metropolitan Theater Corporation, that has an error on it.
Okay.
So MTC, for example, they will see a $9,744 increase for the entire year with the recommended changes in the PBIA. The overall with the hotels, Hotel Santa Barbara, actually Hotel State Street won't pay anything. Hotel Santa Barbara, they'll see a $2,900 per year fee that they'll be charged. And then the Hotel Canary would see a $9,990. The Canary Hotel, they do have their own parking, but they consistently exceed the amount of spaces they need, so they're parking in Lot 2. The valet parking operation uses Lot 2 extensively, and there's been some times where we've had some issues with the use of the Lot 2. So again, the whole premise behind this and the reason the Downtown Parking Committee has consistently recommended moving forward with this is just to have a rate structure that's equitable for all users of our parking facilities in the downtown. I'll be happy to answer any questions the committee might have.
So, questions from the committee members? Councilmember Self. Oh, I'm just a moment. Anybody from the public wish to comment on this issue? Okay, Councilmember Self.
Thank you, Chair Williams. Okay. When the hotels are paying for the parking facilities, do their patrons get any reduced fee, or the patrons also pay to park in the garages?
Well, if one of their customers decides to park in one of our parking lots and not use a hotel or valet park, they have to pay whatever the going rate is. But again, they're taking the advantage of the first 75 minutes free.
Oh, if they're there overnight, excuse me, that's...
Yeah, but they, in our parking structure, we stop on Monday through Thursday. We stop charging for parking at 9 o'clock in the evening. On Saturday and Sunday, we stop charging at.
Browning, maybe it might be good to just take a step back and give us the purpose of the PBI in the first place. We don't pay for ourselves with the fees in the parking lots, right?
No, just kind of brief, and we'll be before council next week with the annual assessment establishing the public hearing that's going to go before council on May 25th. Basically, PBA is a partnership we have with the merchants in the downtown. It was started in the 1970s, and that was a reaction to the La Cumbre Plaza and their free parking. So initially it was established to, one, help build some of the surface lots and pay for the maintenance and operation of surface lots. Back in the 90s when they were looking at changing the rates, one of the things that came up was possibly eliminating the PBIA, and many of the merchants were solid in keeping the PBIA. Overall revenue, we're projecting revenue for next fiscal year of $840,000. It's a small portion of our budget compared to our hourly parking, but it's an important revenue source, too. Without the PBIA, we'd be having to make some significant changes or maybe cut our capital program with some other changes. But it's an important revenue source. It is a partnership. We estimate 20 cents of, the PBA goes about 20 cents of the free period. If you evaluate the free period of $1.50 for that hour, so it covers about 20 cents of the free period.
You may not have this information now, and I understand that, but do we have any idea of the used capacity of our lots in general?
I'll let Brandon.
Councilmember Self, yeah, we have user data. If you have, it would need to be a more specific question as far as the occupancy of a certain lot or a certain day or a time frame. We could definitely provide that. But yes, we keep track on an hourly basis, daily basis, monthly basis. So.
Do you have any kind of reports that you already have and you could give to me?
We could send you the occupancy report that we took to the Downtown Parking Committee a few months ago.
I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, we can do that.
And I guess what concerns me, this is a hard town to do business in. Having been a business owner in this town, I can attest to that. We have seen through our TOT that these hotels are hurting, and my understanding is it's not that their rooms are necessarily not filled, but they're finding themselves in a position to discount rooms instead of having a 2-day minimum, taking that one night because it's better than nothing. And so to impose new fees on an already struggling industry in this town, I guess I'm wondering maybe this isn't the year for it. That's just my gut feeling, trying to look out for the people in this town who are bringing in the lion's share of revenue to our city to put a further dent in their wallets. Thank you.
So as I heard you said this is revenue neutral?
For the overall, we'll see a slight increase in revenue with the theaters and the hotels, but with the change in the financial institutions, we'll see a drop in our revenue, but overall, it may be a couple $1,000s. Doing this is not a revenue generator for the downtown parking program. It was a whole equity thing that the parking committee was pushing for, where there's some categories that they felt weren't paying their fair share in the downtown parking program for the PBIA, and they're all taking advantage of the free period.
So the logic here is that the hotels and the theaters are not paying their fair share, and would have to pay more, who stands to gain the most by paying less?
The movie theaters, because currently they're at .08, so if we don't make the change, they'll save. It's going to be triple, their rate. So if we don't make that change, they're going to save about $9,000 for the year.
No,
the hotels currently aren't paying anything, so if you take a look at it, it's hard to say who's going to benefit more. But
So whose rates are going to go down dramatically? That's what I'm trying to get my sense around. You gave us the top 3 users that would pay more, which is MTC, the Canary, and Hotel Santa Barbara. Who are the folks who are going to pay much less? I heard one bank.
The banks are going to pay less. Santa Barbara Bank and Trust is the one that comes to mind because it's based on the amount of money they have in deposit on January 1st, and so they're going to see the biggest benefit by changing their rate categories to the amount of money they have in deposit to their square footage. And there's another bank, American Riviera, for example. They sent in a protest letter, but they're going to get parking credit. So their rate's not going to be as much as they thought it's going to be. But so far, we've gotten 2 letters from business in the downtown who have concerns about this, and we're doing the analysis of what it's actually going to cost them, and we'll have that ready for the public hearing.
And who were the letters from?
One was American Riviera Bank, and the other was Hotel Santa Barbara. Hotel State Street? Hotel State Street, and they're not paying they won't be paying anything in the PBIA anyway.
Okay. All right.
more.
Something to think about it. Do you have another question, Councilmember Michelle?
Yes. The smaller banks you indicated would be paying more based on the square footage.
Well, we have to see what they're currently paying, and then we'll do the analysis. Like
Right.
Montecito Bank and Trust, if I remember from a few years ago, we couldn't understand why they were paying so low. So they might pay a little bit more, but it's going to be paying by square footage. Won't have to do any type of auditing on how much money they have on deposit. They don't have to send us their financials of how much they have on deposit. Real quick, easy calculation. What is their usable square footage? Like storage wouldn't be accounted there. What's their usable square footage, and that's what they pay in the PBIA.
One other question. The 75 minutes that Parker gets free, my understanding is that the businesses in the confines of this area are assessed for those 75 minutes, and it's divvied up to the business owners. Is that correct?
Actually, no, it's not correct.
Goody.
Yeah.
Tell me what it is.
We in the fee structure, we provide 75 minutes free to all of our paid parking lots in the downtown. We don't have a valet system. The businesses don't pay into it. The only thing we get from the businesses in the downtown is a PBIA. So we get $840,000 a year in revenue from the PBIA.
How is that divided up to the businesses? The businesses that contribute to the downtown parking, how do you arrive at what they owe to the downtown parking assessment?
Yeah, there's different formulas. If we put that previous slide on, Bob, the one with that one there.
Sorry to take everybody's time. I just am curious.
Okay. So we have different categories for the businesses in the downtown. So
Right.
if you're retail, wholesale, there's different areas. For them, there's 3 different categories.
So they're all divided in this
Where
manner?
they're all placed in those areas. So like
Okay.
stores, Nordstrom, for example, they're placed. I believe they're at the top one, the 0.56 per $100 sales. So every business in the downtown is put in an appropriate category, and they're assessed. The finance department works with us, and they're sent their bill on a quarterly basis, and they can pay the whole thing in a year, or they can pay it on a quarterly basis. What we also take a look at is if they're adjacent to a parking lot or a parking structure, they're in 100% zone of benefit if they're in the same block. But if they're across the street or down the block, they don't pay 100%. So either in 50% or 25%, or if they're more than the 2 blocks, it's 20%, so they don't pay in the PBA. So it's set up that way. And when we come before the council, Brandon will lay it all out. He's PBA 101. He's great at that.
Just one quick comment. My accountant is near where Santa Barbara Bank and Trust and borders that parking structure
Lot-
that's usually full.
Lot 9, the
Yes, he
Libero lot.
pays 100% of his fee, and his clients can't park there, but so that is kind of a rub for him, that he's paying the fee, but his people can't get in there quite often.
Lot 9 is full frequently, but most of our lots, you wait, you'll get in within a few minutes. We got a pretty good turnover, but Lot 9 is the one that's right next to Fiesta 5, where we're seeing
Right.
quite a few
Yeah.
people in there.
So, that's just his little
Right.
grumble about it.
And if you
So,
got
thank
a
you.
show going on in the Libero Theater, and then you have the competition between the Fiesta 5 and the Libero Theater, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, and I guess a request that I would have when it comes to council is to have in raw dollars, the fees going up and down for, for I guess the most affected users. And maybe one of the downtown parking committee members coming and explaining why it's, if we're not going to get any more revenue on this, why it's the right moment to change the structure, because I guess that it's worth asking the question.
We certainly can do that. Slight we have. I saw mistakes. I didn't want to show that, and we'll get the raw numbers and we'll get it to the council before then. Unfortunately, with this being a noontime meeting, the chair of the downtown parking committee, he runs a restaurant. This is his busy time, so he couldn't be at today's meeting, but he will be at the public hearing on the 25th.
Okay, great. Any other items? No. Okay, we will adjourn.